Welcome to the Story and Critique stream. I'm Kauffman, and I'm going to help you with making your story better. We are reading thriller, horror, mystery, fantasy, sci-fi, and so much more. I will do a live reading and a live critique for writers in the community. So if you're wanting feedback, submit now. I've done well over 200 plus live critiques and live readings on the critique stream. And we're going to be getting started in just a minute. And by the way, I'm Kauffman, daily writing streamer, and I'm on a mission to help you with finishing your book because I know writing a book can feel like a lonely process, but with a community, with friends, and with other writers, it's made so much easier. So come join because we're starting right now. So just a few ground rules. How do you submit? If you want to get feedback on your story, I accept all levels of work, whether it's a rough draft, whether it's an idea, or whether it's all the way to a final draft. We accept all formats, whether that is a short story, a novella, a script, a screenplay, a graphic novel, poetry, music, whatever it is, as long as it is writing based and it is fiction. I generally do not do nonfiction on the stream, but as long as we focus on fiction and any format is welcome. So all you have to do to submit is linked down in the YouTube description down below. Fill out a couple questions, like your pen name, so I know what to call you, so we know what to reference you, and a place for you to submit your story. So definitely submit now. And if we do not get to your story on today's stream, no worries. It gets queued up for the next stream. We do the story and critique stream every other weekend. So definitely really looking forward to see what we have queued up today. And then how do we critique? So let me pull up the guidelines. When I think about critiquing a story, I like to ask myself and break it down into a couple of different types. Ask myself, is this a character development, world building, dialogue, plot, or a style? Now, a lot of the times, a lot of the stories we receive here are a little earlier on in the development process, so I might not focus on grammar as much, simply because we need to make sure that the core story works first. But by breaking it into each of the elements that work, for example, as like the character development and the dialogue is incredible, but the world building has some opportunities. It helps the writer with getting more intentional feedback so they know how to improve the story. Awesome. And then with that, if I'm working on your story and I'm highlighting it, no worries. That's just a way for me to keep track of where I'm at in the story and to remember what I want to speak on after the live reading. And most importantly, join the conversation. If there's a part of the story that really stands out to you and you're like, hey, that's such a cool part, drop a comment. The author's probably watching, whether it's live or on the replay, and they appreciate the feedback. But if there's something that you don't like or something that just doesn't make sense to you, let them know as well. I am of the belief that if we are submitting our stories here, we want to get as much feedback as possible because without feedback, we can't make our stories better. As authors, we are biased. I know my book, The Last Scarecrow, is going to be the best book in the existence of history, but I am definitely biased, so that might not be the case. So feedback is so important. So absolutely join the conversation. All right, my friends, and I am all ready. So let's get this queued up as I'm going to queue up Courtney's story. All right, and bear with me just a second. I know I am so excited for today. All right, perfecto. Here we go. And I think I got this. All right, and I am all ready. So we're getting straight into Courtney's story, Stalking in the Dark. I am so thrilled, and without further ado, let me cue up, and we are a go. All right. Yes, and Mast, thanks for the call out. You're like, I do channel members only videos, but essentially they're early access. So I actually end up uploading all of the videos. I'll upload them eventually. So you're totally all good. The Story Bible episode was actually really popular. So I'll probably be uploading that at some point soon. Great call out. Okay, so let's get into it with Stalking in the Dark. And without further ado, oh, nope, wrong one. And here we go. So, a thriller romance, Stalking in the Dark by author Courtney Harding. Standing in the doorway of our bathroom, I watch as Lace cannot stop giggling and moving while Creep tries to spray her down with fake blood. I can tell that while Creep is enjoying her giggles as much as I am, he is trying to get her costume perfect for her. Baby girl, you gotta stop moving if you want this perfect, Creep begs. I'm sorry, but it tickles, Lace whines. You look so cute, sweetheart. What are you this year? I ask. Shade! She squeals, gracing me with her wide grin. I'm a porcelain doll left behind at a murder scene, she says, spinning to show off her completed look. You always amaze me with your ideas, sweetheart. I don't know about how short that dress is, though, I tease her. She pouts out her lower lip, pulling the hem of the dress down. Creep stands, grabbing her hands and pulling them up to his lips, kissing her knuckles. Don't worry, Shade. We are always watching our girl, and no one will harm her, he says, shooting me a glare. Let's go show you off to Chain, baby girl, Creep says, grabbing Lace's hand and walking her past me, allowing me to kiss her forehead as they leave the bathroom. Lace has grown in her confidence in the years we've been together. I sometimes forget her insecurities. I walk to the mirror, adjusting my tie and making sure my newsboy cap hides my eyes. Walking into the living room, I see Lace sitting on Chain's lap with one of her lollipops in her mouth. Creep is finishing up packing the ropes and checking the blades to ensure they are sharp. With Pa getting sicker, are we planning to keep this up after he's gone? Lace asked before sticking her lollipop back in her mouth. Creep drops the bags by the front door, glancing at Chain, then me saying, We haven't thought about it. Let's worry about that after tonight, Angel. You still have fun hunting, don't you? Chain asks Lace while he rubs his thumb on her exposed thigh, causing her to shift more into him. She looks at me with questioning eyes, waiting for my answer. We can have a family meeting about it tomorrow, sweetheart. If you don't want to do this anymore, you don't need to come tonight. I say the words, feeling like ash in my mouth, because the thought of leaving her alone makes me sick. She rapidly shakes her head, pulling the lollipop out of her mouth, saying, No, 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 I want to go with you. I open my arms for her as she runs into my chest. I hold her close to me, feeling her light, shaking whisper into her ear. I'm sorry about earlier. I get jealous of how beautiful you are when I can't be an arm's length of you. I feel her sigh and snuggle in closer to me before I hear a faint whisper. I love you, Shade. I'm yours. Watching Lace enter the parking lot of the haunted house, located on the edge of the woods, while Chain and Creep place the bags around the perimeter, has my senses on alert. Seems that after the group went missing from here last year, they decided to have a police presence. I'll need to make a plan for that, depending on who we hunt this year. Why so many police? Chain asks, coming up behind me. 4 people went missing last year. We'll need to make it look like this hunt leaves and isn't ever found after leaving. I tell my brother. He nods at me and I see him scanning the parking lot, no doubt looking for our girl. She sticks to the right of the entrance until she finds our hunt, I share with him, smirking as I notice the moment he finds her where I said she would be. You think she is getting restless with us, or was that just about the hunting? He asked with fear evident in his voice. My brothers and I are only scared of one thing in life, and that's losing our girl. We'll talk with her tomorrow, but I think it's the hunting. She enjoys dressing up, but it isn't like we feast the way Pa does. She might not see the point after he is gone. I say with a shrug, noticing our girl go rigid and rub the hem of her dress like she does when she is scared. Who is that? And why is he scaring our girl? Creep demands, meeting up with us. Chain reaches over, grabbing Creep's shoulder, stopping him from running to our girl. I see the moment Lace makes her decision and disassociates into her role. That's our hunt, I say, watching Lace play her role and follow that guy and his friends into the attraction. My brothers and I make our way to the end of the attraction. As the group, Lace followed in, exits the back, walking to a path that leads into our woods. Lace is playing the scared damsel perfectly when I overhear the guy say to her, "Huh, you sure have grown up, Mousy. Not so ugly and less stuck up." She flinches but recovers, agreeing with him. This has to be at least one of the bullies her parents forced her to be around growing up. Your parents said you disappeared on them. Guess you ran away to get hot. Let's go into the woods and you can show me if you're a tease or a good time, he says, grabbing her wrist. His friends follow them, rubbing their hands together like they're going to be enjoying their time in our woods. I smirk at the thought, but follow behind in case my girl needs me to step in, signaling to my brother the hunt was on. Lace gets her arm free and skips ahead, enticing the men to follow her before she ducks behind a tree, coming back with her hands behind her back. She slowly smirks, and just as the bully steps to her, she pulls the machete out. What the? Mousy, what are you doing? He demands. Her name is Lace. Did you think you were going to touch what's ours? Creep asked from the shadows, chuckling in his creepy clown voice. Chain is on the other side of the group and revs his chainsaw, causing the group to look around, trying to find my brothers. Lace giggles before she goes straight for her bully, with one clean cut. His scream is silenced. The other guys, however, turn in all directions and get caught up by my brothers and me, with the only sounds being the chainsaw, screams cut short, and our girl a giggling mess. After everyone is dead and being hog-tied for transport, I go to our girl, picking her up and telling her how proud I am of her for facing her fears. I kiss her softly before I deepen the kiss and place her on her feet. Can I have my lollipop now? She asks with her innocent eyes, drawing me deeper in love. I smirk, reaching into my pocket and giving my sweetheart whatever she desires. End reading. Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow. What a story. I feel like we went on such a journey with all of these characters. Now, what I absolutely loved is I felt like the world building of it was really, really strong. I felt like there was a lot of elements of this creepy horror, this trio. I want to say it was the three of them, this creepy trio of this like killer tag team as they lure visitors into the haunted house and then kill them off. For those of you who were around the community last year, I know Courtney had submitted this story as the winner of the original Freaky Friday. And the first story ended up being really, really good. So I know we had a lot of fun with that one. And I think what's interesting is we had seen the original story of it where we saw it from her POV. We saw it from the girl's POV, and it was framed in such a way where she was the victim the entire time. It was very much a Wednesday Addams vibe. It's definitely a Wednesday vibe. For those of you familiar with the show, the girl definitely came across like them. And then the punchline of it was, oh, she was actually part of the trio. So you can definitely tell in this one, I like that we're getting the other side of the story. We're getting what the evil trio is actually like the next year now that they are on the hunt. And I think that was definitely a lot of fun. So I would say world building was great. I would say plotting was great. I think the plot overall from start to finish was very simple and straightforward. And I think those two were very, very strong. I think the biggest opportunity is actually going to be in the style and a little bit, I would say character development and style are probably going to be two of the biggest opportunities. Style a little bit more on the formatting. So let's hop into it and see what we see. What did you think of it? I'd love to hear. Drop a comment. All right, so let's cue it up. Let me see here. So, when we going to the beginning, as I ask myself what really stood out to me. So, I think one of my biggest issues, and I have to scan here. Okay, so this is always really, really interesting when I ask myself, what was I missing? So I think going into the story, and if I hadn't read, it's been so long since I've read part one. So for me, it took me a second to be able to kind of like for me to be able to orient myself because I didn't remember who each of the characters are. Now, Courtney, what I it this is going to come down to your intention. So I know that this is part two of a story. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, do you want this to feel like this is a standalone story where a new reader can hop into part two and know what's going on as the story progresses? Or is the reader required to read part one to be able to understand what's going on with part two? Like part one, part two of like a short story. And I think that intent is going to determine what you need to do. So I think one of my biggest challenges, whether or not this is a setup, whether you're wanting to do this as a new one or maybe more as like a chapter two, I think what we're really missing here is a setup for the characters. So what we do is we get Lace, Creep, and Baby Girl. I'm so sorry, Lace Ones, and Shade, right? So we have the three characters. So we have Lace, Creep, and Shade. And I think once I got a couple pages into it, I'm like, okay, I understand who's who. But just going into this as a fresh reading, and it's been a while, I didn't know who each of the characters were because I didn't get a real setup for them in the beginning. I Each of the names were interesting, Lace, Creep, and Shade, but I was trying to orient myself. I'm like, all right, who's Lace, who is Creep, and who is Shade? All great names, and you make a couple references that distinguishes them, but because it's done after the fact, after we get into the narrative, it makes it hard for the reader to orient what's going on. And then essentially what ends up happening is then you almost fall into a white room ish type syndrome because you're like cool characters, but like I kind of don't really know where I am because you haven't given me a setting place. Okay, so you want them to be read in order. Okay, so then if a reader is reading part one and then part two back to back, they have a clear enough understanding of the characters. But what I remember from part one is you don't actually do too much character development into the evil, into creep and into the evil characters, if I recall. So I think because this is a much more turning, I think this would be a really great time to set up your let's see, so to set up the other characters. The first book or part one, I know we had focused on the girl, which I believe, if I recall correctly, our main character from part one was Lace. I believe our main character from part one is Lace, and that is our protagonist. Yeah, so I would say Lace is definitely. I watched standing in the doorway of her bathroom. I watch as Lace cannot stop giggling and moving while Creep tries to spray her down with fake blood. I can tell that while Creep is enjoying her giggles as much as I am, he's trying to get her costume perfect for her. So I think right here is where I would do character setup. Whether or not it's part one or part two, and I think if yeah, she has named her. Okay. So Lace is the main character. Okay. Now if a reader had just come off part one, they're gonna know by the end of part one that they followed Lace the entire time. So I think what we really want to do is you want to focus on setting up, and I'll just put it here. Set up creep. And let's see, creep. I can tell that will creep. I think it's just shade. She squeals. So we have creep and shade. All right, so we have Lace and Creep. Creep is spraying Lace down with fake blood, and I can tell that while Creep is enjoying her giggles as much as I am, he is trying to get her costume perfect for her. Okay, so Shade is the POV. So Shade is our POV character. Okay, I was, and that it could have been partially because it was a live reading, but I think I was trying to get I was trying to get a center point on who my POV was and which each of the characters were. So this is what I would recommend. I almost think it would be beneficial to start off the POV standing in the doorway of our bathroom. I watch his lace. He's basically watching them spraying down. And then let's see, if Shade is our POV, maybe Shade glances into a mirror. Shade glances, or maybe you do something creepy. He picks up like a blood splattered phone from one of the victims and he takes selfies of himself. And then you can use that as an opportunity to paint a picture of what does Shade look like since we're in his POV for the story. That way it really centers up, and that way you don't chance getting the reader lost. I think step one, center the POV, because I wasn't sure who the POV was. And I think that's more because there's different characters. And I think I had assumed that Lace was the POV since that's who I had followed in part one. But this time Shade is the POV. So that has to be set up from the very beginning. Otherwise, it's hard to orient whose head I am in. And then it kind of comes across as a flop between head hopping and White Room Syndrome because I just don't know whose head I'm in. So I would say set up Shade. Set up. So let's do this. I would say set up Shade first. Shade first. And then give an intro to Creep. Now, if you've already done this setup in the previous part, you're not going to have to worry about this. But as I recall, I think the first part is predominantly focused on Lace, and we don't get too much setup on the characters unless you've revised it. So that would be my suggestion here. Once I'm a porcelain doll, but a lot of your dialogue, you have some really great moments. Shade, she squeals, gracing me with her wide grin. I'm a porcelain doll left behind at a murder scene. And I think that was definitely a lot of fun. So you definitely have some really, really good, you definitely have some really, really great moments here. And I think there's some definitely really interesting pieces of dialogue. And I'm like, this feels like this is fun. This feels like the Lace character, which I absolutely love from part one. So let's see. Always amaze me with your ideas. Let's see. She pouts out her lower lip, pulling the hem of the dress down. Creep stands, grabbing her hands and pulling them up to his lips, kissing her knuckles. Let's see. And then we're basically kind of setting up their relationship, essentially. Shade, she squeals. She says, you, sweetheart, I tease her. Okay, yeah, and now I understand why I was trying to orient myself because basically after this first page, then we basically have both. So we have Shade and then Creep do the same exact thing. They do like the same exact action. So I'm like, okay, well, who's who if they're doing the same thing? One kisses her on the forehead, our protagonist, and then the other for on the knuckles, and the other one does the same exact thing. Will harm her. So I think we just need to distinguish them further. I want to feel like they are completely different characters, so I don't chance mixing them up. Well, cool names. I need to have a specific beyond the name. I need to have a specific reference or image on who each. What is the difference between Shade and Creep? And I think you do touch upon it once we get into it, and then you introduce Chain. Let's go show you off to Chain, baby, and then you're introducing a fourth character. So before we even get to Chain, we have to be super clear on who Shade and Creep are. All right. And then we continue into the narrative here. And I think once the setup is revised and adjusted, I think this story will actually be really, really strong. So then we get into the plot itself as they're prepping for the kill. And then once again, I would say give Chain a little intro as well. I think this is perfect having Lace sitting on Chain's lap. I'm like, to me, is Chain like Chain's the creepy one who's probably wearing all these like heavy metal like chains across. I get the feeling that chain is like undead rocker type vibe with all these chains, leather, maybe a little zombie-ish looking in terms of like the style that he's going for. That's kind of like the vibe that I picture in my head for Chain. I know one of them I think is an evil clown. I forgot which one, but I think one of them is an evil clown. Okay. And then the thing that I also want to know. So, okay. So we get here, I open my arms for her to run. I hold her close. I'm sorry about earlier. I get jealous of how beautiful you are when I can't be an arm's length of you. Here I like this because this gives us Shade's motivation. I almost want this a little sooner because I need to understand what is the motivation of the protagonist before we get far in the story too far. So I almost wonder if you have a moment on the first page with Shade, maybe as he's like looking at his camera, looking at himself somehow. Um, and then we understand his motivation immediately. I think this is a great moment. I'm sorry about earlier. I get jealous of how beautiful you are. I'm not sure what he's referring to, whether that's referring to part one or whether that's referring to something that he just did. So I think I would just clarify that so that way I'm in along with this journey. But I think ending on this with their love, I think that's actually really, really perfect. So that was a great setup. Once we get to the haunted house bit, I think everything here becomes pretty clear. I think if I have an understanding of who each of the characters are, the plotting side of this becomes very straightforward, right? So basically now we're seeing what it looks like from the bad guy's POV in this part. And I think that's great. That's beautiful. We love to see. Now we get to see the killers and what they're doing. And of course, this time the victim is some guy who's basically a bully and basically wants to take advantage of her, right? So that's basically the perfect target for them. It's a little on the nose, but we can get away with it, right? I almost ask myself if you expanded this part just a little bit and you added a couple people going through the haunted house and they let some go and they choose some. So like, oh, there's a nice guy, but then they're like, no, we should kill him. No, we shouldn't because he's not the right fit. And then the bully shows up and she's like, this guy. And or some type of like signal, right? Like bat signal, this is the one. Right? She rubs his hair. She's like, all right, that's the one she's going to kill. Or she offers him a lollipop seductively. Like, yep, that's the one she wants to off. But I think you do something like that so that we have a little bit more build up with the victims in the middle part of this. But I think as we see them going through this moment, it's actually really fun. Temperature's over. And I think the back and forth with Creep, Chain, and Shade does work really well. I think it's really, really interesting that we kind of get to see that back end. And this is good. I think he very much plays the bully a stereotype, and I think that works for him. All right. Let's see. And then we go here, and let's before bully. After everyone is dead and being hot tied for transport, I go to a girl, I kiss her, and I think this is funny. I think it, I actually do think that it works that you don't actually really kill them off at the end of this. I think that you're just setting them up now that they've been caught. After everyone is dead. Oh no, okay, they are dead. They are dead. Okay. I was like, I saw the being hogtied for transport. No, okay, so they are dead. I almost wonder if they should be left to be dying or being killed off or being left to nearly die in that same room or the same area where Lace ended up at the end of part one. So that way we kind of get to see that same journey because I want to see that same area as well. So we're seeing the same, it takes a very similar journey. But ending off with the lollipop is cute. I think for a point of tension, I think if you're going to increase the tension a little bit, I might add a moment where maybe one of the bully's friends breaks free and it forces Shade to act heroic, right? For his girl, for Lace, because you've set up a love line, but I need some type of obstacle for Shade, so it feels that his love for her has to be challenged in some way, shape, or form. That way it will make us feel for the character a little bit more. So I think there should be some type of struggle and something doesn't go right, and that would make this ending moment even cuter and more fulfilling. So awesome. Thanks so much for submitting, Courtney. That's all that I got for you, my friend. All right. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. What a great, great first submission. And I am so stoked. Always fun to start off with a thriller. I thought that was a great, great vibe. So we're going to be hopping straight on to the next one, a genre conspiracy thriller, ICBM Racer by author James Nash. So James, we're going to be hopping into yours in just a moment. And by the way, if you're enjoying the stream, follow or subscribe. We're every day with the Right Now community to help you with finishing your book, getting feedback, making other writer friends, and just being a part of the community. So whether or not you like to hang out for the critique streams, our podcast, the writing sprints, or show up to our competitions or conferences, this is the place to help you with your writing journey. So make sure to tap that follow or subscribe button, and you'll be alerted when we go live. All right, my friends. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So, what a nice, nice setup for our first story of the stream. Before I hop into the next one, let's see how y'all doing. I know we definitely had some really good feedback here. I saw this a little while back. You're like, James, nah. Very impressed by your emails, by the way. Thank you. I try to be very straightforward and help people. Anyone, if you submit to the critique stream, I will generally send out an email before the stream that just gives you like a brief description of what to expect. I just try to set expectations so that way people are never disappointed, right? If you know exactly what to expect, it creates a very clear and straightforward experience. My goal is just to help you improve your story, but I get a lot of submissions. I can only read so much at a time. So definitely, definitely, definitely. Thanks so much, James. Awesome. And then what else do we got? Awesome. And I saw a couple of you guys hop into the stream. Rachel, is great to have you with us. Mr. Toptic, of course, always from Twitch. Great to have you with us, my friend. And let's see. And I could tell, Courtney, you definitely got some good praise here. Great narrator. So we definitely got some fun here. Mm-hmm. And I think even to point out to the setup, I think even if this is a chapter 2, I think it's still beneficial to set up our evil characters, set up Shade regardless, because even as a POV shift, since the first part was in Lace's POV, you have to set up Shade's POV regardless. So I think setting up Shade's POV with what he looks like, what he feels like he looks like, his motivation, and everything will make it a lot more impactful because you want us to care about Shade. So far, we only cared about Lace up until the first part. So good call out. Appreciate you, Angela. Thank you for stopping by. Yeah, definitely got some good stuff. Yeah, so for anybody who does want to check out part 1, it's actually in so Courtney was one of the winners in last year's fiction contest, Freaky Friday. If you want to pick up a copy of Freaky Friday, there's actually a couple ways that you can pick up a copy. By becoming a YouTube channel member, you get a free copy of it. And you just have to do the low tier. That's one way. Option 2, you could go pick up an ebook version of it, which is the cheapest. It's only a couple bucks. That's through Amazon. Or if you want the paperback with all of the other stories in it from all of the writers who competed, there's a total of 14 stories in it from all the writers who competed, and then 2 extras from our from the two of us who put the event together last year. And that's for the paperback edition. It kind of has a couple extra goodies. It's all linked down in the YouTube description if you want to go check it out. But that's where you can check it out if you want the copy of the anthology. And yeah, so super exciting. Let's see. Uh, Yeah, and I think that's really cool. And once again, friends, for those of you who join us in our fiction contests, Freaky Friday was our first fiction contest we did last year. And that was supernatural, mystery, thriller, and horror. Faded Fantasy that we did right before the beginning of summer was our second fiction contest, which was for fantasy and romance. And then we're going to be returning with the second annual Freaky Friday. I'll actually be making the official announcement on Monday's update stream. So make sure you join us on Monday if you want to figure out and know what's going on so you can compete in the next Freaky Friday competition. And I think what's cool is a lot of writers ended up extending their stories, and it ended up so actually from both competitions, so actually Freaky Friday and Faded Fantasy, I think that at least a quarter of the writers from both competitions took their original story and then expanded on it and made it a longer work. And that is so cool because my goal with the competitions is just to help get you to write more, give you more opportunities to write, and help you get your work out there. So I think for me, I feel so like proud and honored that it inspired more writers to write, which like that's the goal. So very, very cool. Completely agree, ML. Rachel, that's actually a really interesting call out. I don't actually send out the critique guidelines. I just throw them up on the screen. But if you want to shoot me an email and you want the critique guidelines, definitely let me know and I can send them to you. I was like, that's interesting. I don't think I've had that asked before. Um, it's like maybe I can throw it up as a document. I've been meaning to make a story and critique channel in the Discord. So Rachel, I'd say just make sure you're on the Discord and you can, and I'll throw an update in there. Great call out. And anyone who wants to join the Discord, link down description down below. Everything's in the YouTube description. All right, perfect. So let's get into it. And James, so like you're generally looking forward to this. Please do tear it apart. You need brutal feedback. Excellent. So let's get into your story now. And as I am queuing it up, so ICBM Resa. Okay, so I am all set, and we're going to queue up your story. And let's see, make sure that I have everything that I need. All right, and I am all ready. So, let's see, let me give the setup for this. So this is a genre. This is a conspiracy thriller. This is called ICBM Racer by author James Nash. And let's see, any feedback is good. James wants to be roasted. So if there's something you like or don't like, drop a comment. As long as my belief, as long as we are kind and clear about our comments, all feedback is good feedback. And let me see, I'm just seeing if there's anything else. For context, this is an absurdist depiction of a young man becoming radicalized. And this is a short story, and it's still in the early stages. So let's see if we can help out James. Ever since I was a boy, I wanted to be an intercontinental ballistic missile. When they shot Nixon, my father came home outraged. He'd been a bank robber and he'd done that work with pride for 26 long years. Before that day, and once he'd robbed a bank in Armadillo, Texas without a firearm on his person. Not even a 22 to press cold and flat against the base of another man's skull. There's no honest class of criminal left in this country. He lamented. Not one. I was 6 years old. My mother had died just 3 weeks prior. Radiation poisoning from testing waves at the Raytheon factory. I think they named a break room after her. Uh, I had vague memories of the interior from some precognitive visit. Well, the walls hued green by mercury fluorescence. Clean tiles made a neat grid, which reminded me of my mother singing about bears and lines and squares. It was the war, so mostly women worked the line. Men like my father didn't make it into the draft. That is, if they'd ever been able to find him. The man was an expert at disguise, taking me out to ice cream in a dress and sun hat and scowling at anyone polite enough to raise an eyebrow at his stubble. He was obsessed with the notion of freedom, of being exempt from any responsibility or social contract that others burdened under. Even in a dress, he struck me as more of a man than any uniformed soldier or suited businessman or politician. The man simply didn't care enough to conform, no matter what that might have cost him. After she passed, my father would take me to the factory parking lot, and we'd listen to a cassette tape of Sinatra. We'd be sat on the hood of the car, and he'd sip Cutty Sark from a flask with a sheath of peeling leather. And when he was almost done, he'd pour the dregs into a highball glass, tucked away in a glove box and still stained on the rim. And he'd fumble with a can of Schweppes soda water before filling it to the brim and placing it on the ground. We'd let the moment settle, allow the effervescence to froth over the rim, and then subside. And finally, my father would tip the glass with the toe of his boot, real gentle, and we'd watch its contents stain the tar before packing up to leave. From that point on, while my father kept food on the table, I was left alone. I'd read and run up and down our secluded little street. But most of all, I'd spend time with eyes stuck on that square, which pulsed with life like malignant growth. I could trace the shape of my life in the definitions screened, the sitcom shown, the horrors which unfolded each evening at 6:30. I guess presidents work too, even if I forgot their names. Most of them blended together in a milieu of pasty men in dark jackets, whose respective beliefs all seemed to end at the same point. Parallel and convergent, never really perpendicular. Certainly never anything that engendered a feeling of hope or pride or, God forbid, patriotism in me. Reagan was the next one I really noticed. Launching satellites with lasers attached and spending our tax dollar on missiles even sleeker and sexier. Maybe I was young, but I was enamored by the actor's charm and the science fiction he peddled on our television. Won't lie to you, that shit soured quickly. I wish I could say they never caught my father, but he crawled towards his end, knees scraping against the world we lived in. Even limping and half mad, he'd hold up our local liquor store for the pure thrill of it. I'd have to walk back an hour or two later with a measly stack of 20s, more than he'd even taken by virtue of the bottle of bourbon that his arm would catch like a thorn on the way out. Years went by like that until he became so demented that surely not a soul had been suffering like that, which I saw in him. He'd whisper insane things to me while I tried to keep him fed and the tremens at bay. Dead cats on the roof and stores of gold buried in Mexico and men who were coming to kill him right this very second. And where was the gun? The only thing he seemed to remember clearly was his right to bear arms and use them judiciously. Most teenagers come to hate their parents. That I understand. When the man they'd wanted it to be became little more than a shell of their former self, never understood that. I had a deep well of pity for me padre. Poor soul being carried by that great gray locomotive towards an end he'd never have wished upon himself. The man leading our nation was self-same. I could see it in his eyes and his stance, and I knew the position was vacant. And I wondered who really ran things. And maybe that was the point. I stopped believing in it all, if ever did before. In Reagan's second term, things escalated and kept escalating. Race riots and crack cocaine epidemics and military juntas and far-flung corners where my boyhood friends went and died to uphold our nation's star-spangled hegemony. My best friend's father, Bertrand, was never a nice man, but he got worse. I saw the change start when Junior's mother left, and then I saw the man of their house arrested, screaming like a seagull in our front yard about injustice and the American way. I thought he looked funny and sad, but also maybe free. At least more liberated than my own father in his wheelchair. My father, who had been that bastion of the American ideal for years prior. Sorry, bastard, that, he bleated, wheels pressed up to the wall. As he'd grown older, the mean streak in him had bloomed like algae, and now he'd spend most of his days glued to one glass box or the other, either spying on our neighbors or on the world at large. He's an actor, Dad. I stood up from the couch and went to fetch him another beer. It's just a show, nothing more. They came for him not long after. DNA testing. Madman laughed when they carted him off. Didn't even say goodbye. Some part of me thinks he was waiting for that moment, that it had come too late and too little for him to find any pride in it. I suppose I felt relieved. I loved the man, not whatever he had become. For a few years, I was lost. No child protection service ever came to fetch me. Maybe I was too old to be worth their time. More likely, my parents had simply never registered my existence in legal terms. I was a ghost, and I lived like one for some time, off of offerings on the porch and sandwiches made by kind-eyed men at the deli who had known me for years and didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't even know their names. I sought out companions wherever I could. I didn't have schooling, so there was no chance I'd find others my age with which to commiserate or complain. I had to dig deeper. I found myself in dive bars, mopping floors for spare dollars, unaware of what value my labor should have compelled. They'd ply me with Plymouth lager and the occasional shot of rye whiskey before sending me on my way, stumbling back home with just about enough to buy a loaf of bread. The cheese was government, brought up from caves where they'd been stored like nuclear residue and handed out with the compassion of an executioner's bullet. I joined my first organization because I was hungry. Someone approached me while I slumped against some wood grain counter and asked me if I had a place to sleep. Can't even say I could have remembered my way home. I was just happy to have someone talking to me. It had become a rare thing to have someone ask me a question about myself. They slumped me in the backseat of their car and drove me to a dingy 3-story littered with degenerates like myself. Only those that stuck around really figured out the reasoning. Most of them just left after a night or two or a hot meal. 4 years later, I'd find myself discussing explosive compositions with a like-minded in a little cell, which had sprung out of the grassroots of Portland, Oregon. We called ourselves the Oregon Trail, after a pixelated game filled with suffering, which had somehow found its way into the middle school curriculum. I'd worked before, but never really felt much pull towards it. Certainly no purpose. So when Diego started explaining the history of dynamite, Alfred Nobel, and all that, my ears perked up. I hadn't lost my interest in the explosive. I read somewhere that the bomb is the only machine which achieves its purpose by what could be defined as failure. Didn't say it then, but I thought it. Don't humans do the same? They were the first people to ever take a photo of me. Maybe the only photo I've ever had. Some hanger-on uses old Mamiya medium format to capture use in the empty lot behind our residence. The grass was so tall that none of us could kneel, so we used milk crates to prop ourselves up. Someone joked, "It's like a school photo!" Years later, they'd use that to incriminate us. My face was half covered by a shorter man's mohawk, leaving me some kind of anonymity. Not that I would have cared. I knew they'd never catch me. I wouldn't let myself be dragged out of my house like some petulant toddler. All right, and end reading. Wow, what an intense story. Oh my goodness. I feel like I went on such a journey with this character and I absolutely loved it. I'm not even a big fan of the more not conspiracy, but generally if it doesn't take place in fantasy or sci-fi worlds, I generally am not as much of a fan usually, but I was so pulled into the story. Wow. Yeah, there were some things that worked out really well for it. I think your strongest I think what works out the best is I can tell first off, you have a sense of style that works for you. Now, there's a lot of areas where it could be cleaned up, fixed, and brought out with editing. But like you said, this is an early draft, so I'm not going to focus on the grammatical fixes. But I think your style with your wordings, your similes, and some of your metaphors are actually very, very beautiful and are used to pull us into not just the world, but the character itself. And I would say the character development is also very, very strong as well. I think your character development and your world building, you did a really, really great job. I like the plot. I'm challenging myself if the plot could be cleaned up just a little bit, but I get what you're doing here. We're going, it's like taking through the start of time and starting with the dad. Um, yep, the hook was really good. So let's get into it and let's see what we can do. Let me hop into the beginning. I think it looks like I got about halfway through the piece. So when I think about this, I think ever since I was a boy, I wanted to be an intercontinental ballistic missile. This is a very interesting opening. It's a single line, and it's telling. So we're already starting from the beginning that this is about a character who's telling us about the past, right? Um, I almost think that you could expand on this just a little bit, so that way we can feel emotionally compelled by our protagonist immediately. This line is beautiful. I would add a little bit more to it, so we're even clearer on the motivation and why we're going through their history. Now, as we go here, right? So when they shot Nixon, so you're setting us up with a clear timeline. So right now we know that we're in the present moment in the future. We don't know when. Maybe that's today. Maybe that was 10 years ago. Um, and you said the plot can definitely be cleaned up. Agreed. I worry that I don't do service to the opening line. It's a beautiful opening line. I think you want a little more context in addition to it. I think I would make sure, leave this as the first line. This is a beautiful first line and it's incredible. I think we want a little bit more to it about our protagonist before we go into his backstory, or really before we go into the narrative. So that'd be my recommendation, but leave that as the opening line. That line's beautiful. And I think that is a great job of pulling someone in. And then we go into Nixon. I think what's really interesting is we come to be as a reader, I came to be kind of invested by the father. The father kind of came across as like a modern day cowboy. That's kind of how he came across to me, a modern day cowboy who ended up at the end of his life angry, sheltered, and I think taken away. Somehow. But I really love this. When they shot Nixon, my father came home outraged. What this does a good job is this sets up where our timeline is at. So we're during the Nixon administration, and then we're also setting up for the father. Now, the father's setup is going to be a little stronger if we've been set up with our protagonist first and why our protagonist is telling us about the father. But what we're doing with the father is great. And this is such a good line. You have so many of these moments which are very beautifully written. There's no honest class of criminal left in this country. That's such a great piece of dialogue. And that tells me so much about the dad's character without doing a whole in-depth thing. You could of course go into dad to be like, all right, my dad is this, 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 and this. But instead you use a piece of dialogue. And I just want to say that this is a perfect example of showing through dialogue about a character as an alternative to painting an entire description. So I would say very great job with this. It's interesting. I almost felt like I had a greater understanding in the beginning of the dad over the protagonist. And I need to have a better understanding of our protagonist and the dad, since the dad is really only a factor in how it affects our protagonist's journey. Um, and this is so sad. This is so sad. Like the mom died, radiation poisoning from testing microwaves at Raytheon factory. Okay, so I think about this for a moment, and I'm like, can people get radiation poisoning from testing microwaves? I was like, I don't know history and I know nothing about that, but I think it's that middle ground of maybe it could be true, maybe it isn't, and there could be history there. But I think regardless, it feels like it's ground enough in history that it feels realistic. So I think you did a really, really great job, because we know microwaves or something with radiation. I think that's common knowledge, but to what extent, I don't know. And then you mentioned some type of factor that sounds realistic, whether it's realistic or fictitious. I think this gives us a nice setting into like this is almost, it's like a story based on a true story, but it's not. And I think it gives us that conspiracy vibe very, very well. So excellent world building. And then we're setting up the parents, the setting up the kid. All right, so we really go back into the dad because the mom is basically dead. Yeah, and it's like things like this, we just don't really need. We don't really need like vague memories like this because the place that it's at, it's not important, right? What's important is that you've set up the world here and you mention the mom, but it doesn't really feel like the mom's relevant. I would instead get back into the father. Um, and then we're going into his father's ideology. Now, I understand as the reader, the reason we're setting up the father's ideology is because that is thematically the protagonist's ideology during his early years. And I think that's actually a really, really smart choice, which is why you're making us care about the father so much. And this was interesting. Even in a dress, he struck me as more of a man than any uniformed soldier or suited businessman or politician. And when I was reading it in the moment, I'm like, why is he in a dress? Like nothing wrong with it, but I'm just trying to understand like what. But then I'm like, okay, he's because he's an expert at disguise, taking me out to ice cream in a dress and sun hat and scowling at anyone impolite enough to raise an eyebrow at his stubble. Cool. I was like, I like totally missed that in the live reading. Um, so mostly women work the line. Men like my father didn't make that is if they'd ever been able to find him. So okay, so he's working the line. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so for him to get a job, he has to basically dress up as a woman to be able to get the job. And if people give him a raised eyebrow, people look at him funny, he basically says, "Screw off." His vibe says, "Screw off." Okay, okay. So that I think you could just make the setup to this just a little cleaner for sure. But that is actually really, really great. And this is actually a really great line. It took me a moment to catch that. You said after she passed, my father would take me to the factory parking lot and we'd listen. Okay, so this is after that persona passed. I would clarify this. Um, After she passed, I mean, my father's persona. Maybe give the character a name. Like, what is this woman character that the father's disguise is called? What does he call her? After and then if you use a name, you're like after in quotes past. That makes it much, much cleaner. And then we go into the next part. This is all good. And this is good. So then we're kind of getting onto the back end of the father's life. I think it was interesting that you keep calling them Reagan. The only thing is that you used you used the correct spelling of Reagan's name in the beginning, but then you changed to this other variation of Reagan later on at this point. Pick a lane. If you're gonna go the real name Reagan, stick with that. If you're gonna go with a childish spelling because that's where the character's at, go with that. But my guess is because the story is being told in the past tense, that the present moment of the story, the character is an adult. So I would probably stick with that, knowing that the main character is an adult, unless they have a reason for calling him Reagan. This is such a beautiful, and once again, you have these moments. You're like, I wish I could say they never caught my father, but he crawled towards his end, knees scraping against the world we lived in. That is so beautiful. Oh man, like what you and once again, it's your style. You have this very innate sense of using words to paint a picture in very brief moments. It's all throughout your writing, and I think that's really cool. You want to let moments like these, you want like moments like that intro line, you want to let these moments shine because they're so well written and crafted. And then it's like so sad. It's just so sad that our modern day cowboy, our modern day thief, um, uh, disguise extraordinaire dies, or like the end of his life is almost just so like pitiful in a sense. And I think that makes you really care about the protagonist because the dad was like looked up to as a hero in the beginning, but then he devolves into basically a pitiful alcoholic. And I think that was actually very beautifully done. I think what I would do is once you get here, I think I would cut down some of this description and let's just get to his death, like get to the end. I think this is you're drawing out his end years, but like let's just get to it because we want to move on to the next part of the story. I think you kind of already made it clear that like this is his ending. So I would either edit down or get rid of that in between and then just get to his death in the end when he's taken away. Okay. Yeah, and then we have the thing with the best friend being taken away. I thought he looked funny. Sorry, bastard. That he bleeded, wheels pressed. It's interesting because then we're kind of having that moment. They came for him not long after DNA testing. Madmen laughed when they cart him off. Mhm. It's kind of interesting the Bertrand, so the friend being taken away. I kind of ask myself like, what's the point of that? And I guess it's the conspiracy of like, okay, he's being taken away and carted off. I think it can work, but I think you have to set up a little bit more. Once the father starts declining, I think you have to make it very clear that that the father starts having conspiracy theories, and that's the whole back end of his life. So after that, when you're like, I wish I could say they never caught my father, but he crawled towards his end, knee scraping against the world we lived in, one conspiracy theory after another. At first, it was the kid across the street who was a commie, and then it was the his best friend who was a mad scientist. I think something like that. So thematically, you tie his ending into him becoming a conspiracy nut, and I think that would be the way to make the back portion of this a little stronger. But once again, entirely subjective. That'd be my recommendation, though. Um, and then so I hopped in the second part of this because I was curious to see. So clearly, this is Act One. We hop into Act Two, and now our protagonist is basically on the streets, living by themselves as they go to the next portion of their story. No child, basically, no CPS came to them. Yeah, so they're basically a homeless street hoodlum, which is very interesting. And I think you do a really, really interesting job of making us feel bad for your protagonist. We feel for the protagonist. They're not only have they lost now their dad, now they're on the street. They basically live nowhere. They get a job, but they're basically like taken advantage of for the most part. And then they finally get some type of housing. And you could tell it's probably going to go in that back and forth way throughout the rest of this part of the story. But yeah, I just want to say you did a good job of setting this up. Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of this is very straightforward in terms of what's happening to them. I don't think I have any real issues with the plotting of this part of the story because I'm intrigued. I'd have to read more. Um into what happens after the housing situation and what happens next for me to really, if I were to get a better understanding of if I think the plot at this part of the story makes sense or if it works. But overall, so far, it seems like it does. The Oregon Trail bit is funny. I don't think I had read enough to really understand about a cell. Um, oh, so a grassroots. Okay, a grass. I almost thought like it was a criminal thing, so it's a grassroots movement. So I think for this bit, I would just clarify what that means, what type of like movement they're a part of. Are they like with a bunch of hippies, in the 70s? Like maybe that's what it is. I'm not sure. So I think you could clarify that. And I think because you've set up um politics and Reagan and the administration as a setting stone, I think if you want to be consistent, you should lead with what part of the administration it's in at that time, 4 years later, after Watergate, after Reagan's Watergate, right? Or not Reagan, but after 4 years later, like mention some type of political event, and then go from there. That'd be my recommendation, only because you've set that as a standard earlier on in the story. Um, Awesome. And I think that is everything that I got for you. Awesome. James, thank you so much for submitting. Really, really great work. Wow, what an interesting story. What a really good read. So thank you so much for submitting that, my friend. Definitely really, really fun. And you're, of course, are always welcome to resubmit, whether later versions or whether revisions or later versions of the story in future critique streams. So definitely recommend resubmitting. Awesome. And now we're going to be queuing up our next one. So we're going to be queuing up one of our returning ones. Let me pull it up. All right. So now we're going to be hopping into some military sci-fi as we're hopping into Calvin's Storm 2, the Storm Chronicles, Book 2. So, Calvin, I've got your story on deck. I'm going to be queuing up your story next. Awesome. So exciting. But in the meantime, if you are looking for help with your book, if you're looking for writing services, I do editing and coaching to help you with finishing your book. So we offer the free things. I have the critique stream, we have the Discord where you can get feedback on your work from the community. And I try to make sure that there's always free options. But let's say that you're ready to up your game a little bit and you're looking for an editor, or maybe you just need somebody to do an alpha reading. I offer a variety of writing services, whether that's alpha reading, book editing. I do developmental, line editing, copy editing, and proofreading. I do all of those. And I also recently launched audiobook narration services. So if you're needing your book read aloud, or you just need help figuring out your life as a writer, or maybe you're just struggling with staying consistent, then a writing coach is definitely the way to go. So if you want to learn more about the writing services, it's linked down in the YouTube description down below. And then also drop the link here. Really what you can do is you can sign up for a free consultation, super free. And we'll basically talk about what you're looking for and what makes sense to you. So this is a form for you to fill out if you want to know more and you're looking for help with your next book, story, script, or anything. So definitely recommend. Awesome. And on that note, thank you so much. So let's hop into the next one. Let me just catch up on the comments. Oh, interesting. So you said it's an alternative history, so different from IRL events. Okay, so I never would have known that from reading this. I actually thought the entire because so for somebody like myself, the average reader who doesn't like I'm not a history buff, so I'm not too familiar with history. So I had assumed like, okay, this is actually historical events. If this is an alternate history, an alternate timeline, I would recommend clarifying that somewhere. I would recommend setting that up and the beginning so that way the reader is like, okay. I mean, unless part of it is to make it, unless like part of that is supposed to be like the suspense and like the surprise of it, of like, oh, this is actually like an alternative timeline. So, I think I might set that up somewhere, because you're right. If you don't make it clear, then readers will think like readers who do have a better understanding of history will be like, oh, they're wrong. Did they not do their research? Right. So I think that's definitely something to keep in mind. There's parts of it where I like wouldn't have even known because I'm not too familiar with history. I'm not a history buff. Mm, you're like, maybe you should change it to normal American history, but you're just worried it'd get too political in that case. Yeah, and I mean, James, this is always the chance that you take whenever we reference things that can be like hotly or that can be debated or that make people feel a way, whether politics, religion, or something else to that nature, we do always run the risk of people feeling a way about it. I think if the question I ask myself is why reference the presidents? If you reference presidents, you're going to run the chance of, okay, there's going to be political undertones to it. It doesn't have to. There's other ways that you can actually set the time, or you can reference like a major event without referencing politics if you want to stay away from politics. If you want to reference different presidents, you could do that as well, but I think you have to reference it as only a setting for the time and not actually have the character really speaking to how they feel about what the administrations are doing during those different histories. If you don't want it to get too political, so but I mean, you could go either way. You can make it present, you can make it reality, or you can make it alternative. I think you just want to figure out pick a lane and then make it super clear for your reader so they can get on board. That was interesting with the microwave. You're like, no, they can't, by the way. They use non ionizing radiation for microwaves. They don't poison. And you said your credentials are BSc honors degree in biochem, so you would definitely know. I was like, right, that stuff right over my head. But I think to me, there's a degree of potential believability. And because of my lack of knowledge, same with the administration, I could potentially believe it. So I'm like, okay, maybe that could be true. I don't know enough to be able to speak to it personally, but it could make sense without diving deeper. So I think that's actually really, really interesting. But maybe this is a world, if you do an alternate timeline, maybe this is a world where microwaves aren't used because they used a different type of radiation that killed people. I don't know. Maybe that's what happens in this alternate timeline. That's interesting. I mean, that's totally understandable. You said you'll definitely consider sending in your fantasy story next, which is actually really, really cool, by the way. You said it's much more developed, but also something I'm more scared of sharing. Um, and you know what, James, that's so understandable. A, a reason that a lot of writers don't end up moving forward in their writing career, and I'm not saying, just saying a lot of writers I see in general, is because there's a fear of putting their work out there. Because putting our work out there is a way of us showing our vulnerability to the world, and it's difficult to be vulnerable. I think my challenge and my understanding, this is what I always tell people, is what is your goal as a writer? Ask yourself, why are you writing? If you're writing stories for yourself, then it doesn't matter whether you put it out there or not because they're just for you. But if you're writing your stories with the intent of you want to publish it, you want people to read it, then you got to put it out at some point. And you just have to recognize that sometimes you're going to get great, awesome feedback. Sometimes you're going to get really bad feedback. You have to be able to figure out how can you detach yourself from the feedback so that way you don't feel a way about when you get bad feedback and then want to stop writing. Or you could be the type of person who are like, yeah, you know what, that nothing bugs me. I'm awesome with feedback. So something to keep in mind. Interesting. Yeah, so like Bixen, not Nixon. So awesome. Thank you so much for that, James. Really, really cool. All right. So let's hop into it. All right. So we're going to hop into the next one. Yeah, that's interesting, Coel. You said accept feedback and don't end up like Audra Winters. I remember hearing about the Audra Winters the backlash a while ago, but I'm honestly not super familiar with it. I don't think I was yeah, I don't think I dug deeper into the story. So I'm not sure, but I think my gut tells me that she responded really poorly to a certain type of feedback. But I'm not sure. So yeah, and I think it's just another reason that we just want to be open, right? Because we want to recognize that the only way our stories get better is by having other people read it, and we also have to recognize that 90% of the time feedback is subjective. Somebody telling me something about my story doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it's a fact. It is their truth based off their subjective experience. Now, if you're getting feedback from somebody who's a reader, as compared to feedback from somebody who's edited 30, 50 books, the weight is a little bit different because there's more experience and credibility there, but it doesn't minimize or detract from either. So I think it's always important to know who are you getting your feedback from, balance it against all the other type of feedback, and then take that feedback, align it with whatever your goals are for your book. Which is why, like we all know as authors, we want to get multiple reviews for our books, and we can't just take one bad review as truth. We want to take multiple reviews. If I have 30 people saying very similar things that like a part of the book doesn't make sense, okay, there's probably a part of the book that I need to look at. If there's one thing where the person's like, this part of the book doesn't make sense, it's horrible, worst garbage I've ever read, but then 30 other people who's like, yeah, this is amazing, I love the characters, I understood, it was clear, debatable, right? So I think it's things to keep in mind. I see that. Yeah, so short story, poor reaction to feedback, and a huge lack of editing. Awesome. All right. So let's hop into the next one. Great. I love the feedback conversation. I mean, you guys know me, right? I write Scarecrow on the stream every day, and I am definitely always, always open to feedback. It's like, I want to make Scarecrow the best book it can possibly be. Okay. All right. So give me just a moment. Let me queue up Calvin's. Just one moment. All right, so let's hop into it. So we're hopping into military sci-fi. Oh, Storm 2. This will be this will be fun. Okay, so let's do it. And I think we're getting the alien race. So we're getting a POV for our military sci-fi. And let me throw it up on screen. All right, perfect. And I have this one all set. Okay. And let's see, make sure I got this queued up, and I think I am all ready. So, this is the second book of the Storm Chronicles. It is a military sci-fi by author Calvin Hammond. And let's see, is there any setup? This is a first look, so this is an early draft of it. This is, like I said, this is the second book. We are in the middle of basically a giant military, giant science fiction space battle between our humans and then the evil, not evil, it's subjective, but definitely the not so good alien race, the Gardas. I always think that that this series feels very much like a type of like a Star Trek in a sense. Like it feels kind of like Star Trekky, and we get some really cool alien vibes. So we're going to be hopping into this. Where what we're doing is it looks like we're getting into the POV of the aliens, the Gardas. And let's see what we got. Chapter 8, Regalis. Gardas Carrier, Spirit of Night. Date, January 9th, 2259. Time, 0625, local time. Aboard the Spirit of the Night, the praetorist Shrike let out a bored sigh, his mandibles set in a deep frown as he observed the current battle on the surface. He'd been ecstatic when War Chief Trafal had given him the command of his own squadron. He thought it would be a glorious one. Instead, when he brought his squadron into the system, it was clear of any fleet, and the legions touched the ground unopposed. How boring. He had hoped for even a ship or two to destroy, something to boast when he met with the other leaders for their meetings. Instead, there was nothing for him to do but watch the army throw itself against the stupid Kodras. The thought of them made him chuckle a bit. The troops took to calling the humans Kodras, soft bone, after a few interrogations left them with broken bones and quivering in corners. Still, it wasn't their fault nature had designed them to be weak. At least that's what he thought most days. These Kodras on the planet below were proving to be much tougher. They had been holding out with no support for over 30 planet rotations and had yet to give in. Still, from the reports, it was only a matter of time until they fell, and the base was there. Praetorus, one of our cyber teams on the surface, has secured a terminal. They have set up a link for us to cut our way in the Kodras systems. The Praetorus nodded at the intelligence officer. He sat down and ran the necessary programs. The software is more sophisticated than we've seen them use elsewhere. However, the stupid Kodras can't keep us out forever. I've already broken into their system and have begun downloading it. In 25 minutes, we'll have their entire database. Good. Now we'll see what was worth fighting over there. Keep me appraised of the progress. I'll be in my chambers if you need me. The Praetorus started to leave the bridge when a console beeped. He turned to face a crewman who looked at him and said, Praetorus, distortions forming inside the system. They match those created by Kodras when they leave under space. How many? I count 12. They're exiting under space now. The Praetorus' eyes widened as he saw the ships enter normal space and spread out laterally. As the ship's scanners identified them, he saw they were what were called Saber-class cruisers, and his small fleet was outnumbered 2-1. He looked at his cyber warfare specialist. How much longer on the download? I need another 18 minutes to make sure we have everything. In 18 minutes, we're going to be dead with nothing to show for our effort. Helm, keep us in geosynchronous orbit over the Kodras base. Send a message to the Battlemaster of the Fire in the Heart. Give him command of everything except for us. Have the legated launch all fighters and bombers to form a screen to protect us. Yes, Praetorus! Everyone shouted and issued orders. The Praetorus breathed in through his mandibles. He kept one eye on the timer. He knew that they stood no chance against the enemy based on their sheer size. Still, the one thing they are taught from the birthing chambers is that victory can be achieved through more than martial means. On board the Woodstock, Hoffman watched on her screen as the ships exited slipstream space and spread out laterally. Behind them, Bradley's 3 transports appeared in formation. Good. Everything was set. Now they just needed to draw the ships away from the carrier. Vice Admiral, the enemy cruisers are moving toward us. They've launched fighters. What about the carrier? Are they holding position? Yes, ma'am. They launched fighters and are heading towards us. Good. Then the carrier should be mostly defenseless. Time to get to work, people. Open a channel to the fleet. Channel open, ma'am. Attention, all ships. This is Vice Admiral Hoffman. We're preparing to engage the enemy. I want the Avenel and the Iselin to pull back and protect the transports. Everyone else move forward and prepare to launch missiles. Tell the CAG to launch all fighters. CAG, launch all fighters. Out in space, sleek fighters roared as they flew out of launch bays. They grouped together into their squadrons and flew towards the Garda's fighters as their cruisers followed them in. The two sides clashed in the vacuum of space. For many of the Garda's pilots, this was their first time encountering the human fighters in combat, since there was no fleet to fight when they got here. But many of the human pilots were veterans of the Tyrus campaign. They had experience fighting the Gardas and were leveraging that experience with lethal efficiency. Seeing the tide turn quickly, many of the Gardas broke off to try and regroup with their capital ships, but the human fighters quickly cut them down and drove them away. On board the Gardas cruisers, many of the battle masters were a bit stunned that their fighters had been decimated in under 5 minutes. Ma'am, our fighters have cleared out the skinnies. Good. Do we have a firing solution? Yes, Vice Admiral. All ships are reporting lock on. Then fire! Hoffman watched the holographic screen as the missiles sailed through space, slamming into the skinny ships, damaging them. The skinnies counterattack with missiles of their own, each one firing dozens of missiles. She sees the attack coming and hops into action. Launch flare bombs! Set C with dispersal pattern to 2! Have me with black ammunition! Move it, people! The ships all sent out their flare bombs that launched flares. Missiles veered and detonated as they rammed flares. A few of the missiles got through as the squadron threw up a flak wall. The shells exploded into smaller shells, destroying the missiles. The human ships launched another volley of missiles. The Garda ship, already on fire, took more damage as the newest wave of missiles hit them harder than the previous. One of the Garda's cruisers took dozens of hits and exploded as its reactor went critical. The remaining Garda ships circled her to form a defensive cordon, while life pods abandoned the doomed cruiser. All around her, the crew let out whoops of excitement as the skinny cruiser went down in flames. Hoffman didn't join in the celebration. It was still too early, and there was much to do. She called out to her weapons officer. Tactical. What's our range to the enemy? Ma'am, we're just within railgun range. Then let them have it. Open the fire. All forward railgun batteries. Pour it on. How long before the second squadron appears? Any minute, ma'am. The human ships continued advancing forward as they opened fire. The railguns peppered the Gardas with hundreds of shots as they damaged the armor all over. The Gardas fired back with their laser batteries. The barrage of blue shots traveled through space and hit the cruisers, trying to stop their advance. On his carrier, the Praetors watched the destruction of his ships. The Kodras, despite their perceived weakness, were destroying the fleet with brutal efficiency. To make the situation worse, they hadn't done much damage to the enemy fleet. What's our fleet status? Fury is ours, has been destroyed. Fall of Night and Fields of Destruction are reporting heavy damage and are evacuating. The rest of the fleet is taking heavy damage. What about our fighters? Can they provide some support? Most of our fighters were wiped out, and those that weren't are back on board, being ready for another sortie. How much time before the download is complete? Sorry, Praetors, but we still need another 10 minutes. How is that possible? Should be almost done. The enemy, ECM, electronic countermeasures, is causing interference with the download. We're trying to counter it, but the system wasn't designed for this. If we move away, we can get away from the ECM, but then we'll be out of position for the download. No. We'll just have to get it done. Divert all power to the computer core. See if you can get it to process faster. In the meantime, we need Praetors, more distortions opening up. Where? And how many? 3 of them, 500 meters off our port bow. The ships are exiting under space now. The Praetors watched on his screen as the 3 ships exited into normal space. Before he could issue any orders, the lead ship opened fire. A crimson beam of pure anger shot from the lead ship. The beam slammed into their armor and drilled straight through it. The beam penetrated deck after deck until it hit the primary reactor and destroyed it. The Praetors watched as the bridge erupted in flames and a sea of sparks. The lights went out, casting everyone into darkness until the red emergency lights came on. Get me emergency power now! Praetors shouted. We can't get a hold of engineering. Main power is offline and the backup batteries are not responding. Life support and gravity generators are running on automatic backups, but they are already failing. I estimate 10 minutes until we have no life support or gravity systems. Damn it all to under galaxy. Sound alert to abandoned ship and get to the planet. Everyone, evacuate now. The crew nodded their heads and sounded the alert. Orange lights strobed throughout the ship, telling people to head to escape pods. As the bridge crew left, Praetorius grabbed the wrist of one of the technicians. Come with me. On board the Aurora, Horatio watched the battle unfold. His face was a mask of cold, hard resolve. Inside, he was jumping for joy. Adrian had suggested that they fire the laser cannon as soon as they exit slip space. The surprise attack dealt a heavy blow as they took out the Skinny's main reactor and disabled the carrier. What's the status of the carrier, Mr. Ross? Adrian asked. I'm pretty sure we've disabled it. Their power output is barely registering. They're launching escape pods towards the planet's surface. Alert the guard on surface, they have incoming. Supreme Commander, what do you want to do about the carrier? Adrian asked. What's the status of the other squadron? Vice Admiral Hoffman has been completely devastated the skinny ships. The last cruiser looks to be fleeing, but the squadron is already firing at her. Sir, they have just destroyed her. Horatio nodded. Inform General Bradley to assume orbit and send his relief to the base. Aye, sir. Messages sent and his transports are moving into position. Everyone let out cheers of excitement. They'd finally won an offensive engagement against the skinnies. The cheers were silent for a moment when an explosion occurred from the carrier, sending debris soaring away from the planet. Many were wondering what was happening, but no more explosions happened. There was no life signs amongst any of it, and it was soon forgotten while everyone watched Bradley's army deploy. Out amongst the debris, a life pod made subtle movements to slow itself down and not crash into anything. On board, the Praetorius manually entered the movements until his inertia slowed down to almost nothing. On board, he had enough supplies to last a week, if rationed carefully. The main issue was power. His pod's battery should last 5 days before he would have problems. If all went well, the next supply ship would show up in 3 days, and then he would activate his locator beacon. He knew he was taking a big risk, but he was also aware that if he went planet side, there would be no escape for him, and he had too much that had to get back to the fleet. Besides his supplies was an automatic beacon and a score box that contained all the memory from the Spirit of Night computer core. They'd only managed to download 40% of the data, but as he thumbed through it, he saw one entry that would be interesting to the army. Something called Project Goliath. End reading. Awesome. Calvin, really, really great work. Oh my goodness. I love the way you handle space battles. I think the way that you plot out your space battles is very, very fun. I think that chapter had a very clear arc. I loved that the character arc that we're following on that chapter is from the POV of an alien, of a Garda commander. I thought the Praetorius, I thought that was actually really, really cool. We get to start off the chapter where he's kind of bored because nothing's happening. And then his ships that he has with him are basically all annihilated, and he is basically the lone survivor at the very end. I think it's a really nice, it has a really nice flavor. I would say his character development is very spot on. And I think I would say character development and plot are definitely the strongest elements of this chapter, especially the plotting of this battle was very, very fun. So absolutely love it. Now, I think when I think about opportunities, I think there are moments where the dialogue can be cleaned up. But like you said, this is an early draft, so you're still fine tuning some of these elements. So I think dialogue is probably one of the bigger opportunities. Some elements of world building. So let's get into that. And by the way, if you're here on the live stream or you're watching on the replay, what did you think of it? Drop a comment. I would love to hear from you. All right. So let's see what we got. So I think starting off with the beginning, I think starting off with the Praetorius was actually a very, very strong start. I feel like we got to go on this whole journey. I feel like we got to go on this whole journey with Praetorius Shrike, which was very cool. I think the one thing that I want is I think I want more references to him being a Garda. You reference it in the beginning and the end, but in the moments when he's speaking, I kind of want more references to like them being aboard the Garda ship, so that way there's even more distinction between what it feels like to be aboard a Garda ship and what it feels like to be aboard a human ship. I think this opening is fine. I love that you go into this description of how they call humans, the Kodras. I think that's fun. It's like, oh, like, oh no, like because their bones break easily, like, shivering. But so good because it gives us the human dichotomy and the look at how humans are perceived from the Garda race. So very, very good. I'm really happy at that. And I thought that was a really nice start to this. And now I could feel like if we do more Garda POVs, this is probably how it's going to go. The humans called it Gardas, the skinnies, and then the Gardas are going to call the humans the Kodras, which is very interesting. The skinnies versus the Kodras, which I absolutely love, by the way. So I think with what I want with some of these dialogue is I want some more action, not necessarily speech tags. Like sometimes speech tags, but I think they need a little bit more action tags and speech tags with. For example, Pretorius, one of our cipher teams on the surface has secured a terminal. They have set up a link for us to cut our way in the Codra system. Like, who is speaking first off? Now, I know you have the intelligence officer here, but because this is a brand new character, I need to know who is speaking immediately. So I would go, the intelligence officer um, cried cried. You could do something like that, or you could break it up. Pretorius, one of our cyber teams on the surface, has secured a terminal. Has secured a terminal. The intelligence officer screamed. The intelligence officer screamed, pulling aside the console. Right, so you could do something like that. You could do something like this, where you're doing it in between. This might mix it up a little bit, but I think you have to do something that adds a little bit more flavor to some of the individual bits of dialogue. Now, I'm not going to worry about like editing because it's still an earlier draft, so we're not as concerned with grammar. Pretorius, I think the actions that they're taking is very good, and I really like that. And I love how like there's contrast, right? So it started with him being bored, and now 12 ships are exiting, and they're clearly forced into a battle. So I think that's really good. I love the names. Absolutely love the names of these ships. I think the way they name the ships is actually really interesting, and it gives such a clear distinction to the Garda's world building as a race as compared to how humans name their ships, which I absolutely love. Right? So you see here, the Praetorius breathed in through his mandibles. I love that. I want more references to the alien, the Garda anatomy, or like Garda things on board their ship, in between throughout. Because I think this, anytime you do things like this, it adds to that sense of the Garda race and just how different they are from humans. But this ending, that bit right there is good. And then we go back to Hoffman, and we're here with Hoffman and basically her carrying orders. I think the biggest thing that we're needing is similar with the dialogue. I think we just need either speech tags or action tags, so that way we know who's speaking. But what's happening is fun. I think the elements of the space battles was actually really strongly done. And this is why I love the way that you plot space battles. I felt like I had a clear understanding of what was going on with the ships as they were appearing and fighting and shooting things. And that was very, very cool. And it made me so engaged, like, all right, well, which side's going to win? Clearly, the humans just pulled out all these ships with this surprise maneuver. Yeah, so I mean, and then I think like these next bits are good. I mean, it's just plotting, kind of going back and forth. This is all good. On a cruiser, this is all good stuff. And I like this. So, honest care, the Praetorius watched the destruction of his ships, the Kodras, despite their perceived weakness. So, this is all good. Once again, I just want more Alien, more Garda references, but I love these names. Names are great. I almost feel like because this is kind of like the turning point of the battle for him, I feel like you might want to reference how he had wished for an easy battle. Maybe he should have some type of outbreak or something that starts this off of he spoke too soon or they're still going to survive, something to that effect. So really, because we want to be reminded of his motivation. Um, and clearly we're focused now on the download. I think it's good. good. I asked myself if the download should be referenced in the very beginning, maybe, but you're kind of using it as like a attention. And then this is also chapter 8, so you might have already set this up previously. And then I love this, right? So the Praetorius is trying to maneuver, and then we have 3 more human ships there. And I think it's a really, really good counter strike. Damn it all to Under Galaxy. This is great. I want more terms like this because this is such a great phrase. Damn it all to Under Galaxy. I don't even know what Under Galaxy is. I don't know if that's a ship. I don't know if that's just a phrasing, but this makes me feel like this is something like the Gardas say. I want more like sayings like this, and I thought that was really interesting. And then we basically end off with Horatio and Adrian. Now, of course, these are main characters. They've already been set up. Um, I think this is fine for them. Yeah, so I mean this is all good stuff. I like that. Then we go to Adrian and Horatio. I think that's all good stuff. And then I love the ending bit where basically he's in his life pod and he just has to survive. And then the twist at the end, the cliffhanger project. They only got 40% of the download, but they stole something called Project Goliath. Great cliffhanger. Excellent cliffhanger, my friend. And what a perfect way to end off the chapter. Our protagonist, and I think the protagonist of the chapter, this is a chapter protagonist. I think he goes through a very clear character arc from being at the commanding his little fleet. He's bored. He wants battle. He gets what he asked for, and his fleet gets decimated. He basically has to destroy his own ships, right? Because the Gardas are ruthless. And he ends up basically the only sole survivor because he has the data he needs to get with the twist. So really, really nice work. Really, really great plotting. And thanks so much for submitting, my friend. Always looking forward to reading some more. All right. So, what a nice little story. That was definitely a lot of fun. I was really, really happy to be able to go through that. And I could tell a lot of you in the chat enjoyed that as well. Let's see. What are we going to be doing next? Let me see what I have in queue. So, I have. All right, so we got another one here. We have welcome to Spellpaige. So I got Zencast over here. So on deck, we're going to have welcome to Spellpaige Academia by Zencast, one of our other authors. We've gone through a few chapters in the past before. Looks like we're going to be digging into chapter 4. So, Zencast, I'll have your story queued on deck in just a moment. And once again, if you're just hopping to the stream, welcome to the Story and Critique stream. I do live readings and live critiques from writers in the community. If you're wanting feedback on your story, submit now. The link is down in the YouTube description. All you got to do is fill out a couple questions and you can submit. If it doesn't get read today, then it gets queued into the next a future Story and Critique stream. We do have a high volume of submissions, which is why I always recommend the sooner you submit, the better. The sooner you submit, the better, because we get a lot of submissions and I only have so much breath. I have so much breath in a stream. But I love doing these things. So definitely submit now. Okay. So let's get into it. And by the way, if you're enjoying the stream, share it with a friend. We love having writers of all different styles, types, and genres here in the community. The more different styles of writers we have, whether that's beginners, advanced, we have writers who are just starting out. We have authors who have published many, many books. Whether you work on short stories or novels, or maybe you work on screenplays, maybe you're a poet, maybe you love fan fiction. maybe you're a graphic novelist or you're working on graphic novels. We accept and we want all types of writers because the one thing that we have in common is that way we want to tell a story we want to tell our stories and put them out to the world. So share this with a friend and help bring more writers to the community. So that way we can get more feedback, more stories, and more awesome, more writers. Awesome. Oh man, I am having a blast. I love reading through all these types of stories. I feel like we've gotten a really interesting mix of stories today. Let's see. And then how did everyone feel? All right, and let's see what we're all. By the way, I saw a couple of new faces hopped in right before the stream. So great to always see new faces. Love seeing new writers in the community. Always feel free, like if you're new to the community, feel free to let us know like what type of writer are you? Is there what is your preferred genre, or is there anything that you're really excited right now? Love seeing other writers here. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You said shouldn't coaches be capitalized? Technically, it's like a slang. Technically, it's kind of like it's kind of like a curse word that they're using about humans. I don't think it needs to be capitalized because basically, Codras is basically the alien, the Garda is calling humans Codras. Like that's that's like it's like their slur for humans. So it's like I don't think it needs to be capitalized because it's technically like an alien curse word. So I don't think for that reason it would be. Yeah, and then right. So for anybody who doesn't know, Calvin published the first book of the series recently. Um, you can find the Storm Chronicles: The Tyrus Campaign is over on Amazon. So for anyone who hasn't checked out the first book, it's a fun book. Definitely a really fun book. So definitely go check it out. It's over on Amazon. I know he published the first book, I want to say a few months ago. So this was chapter 8 that we just went through. Book 2 that we're working on. So definitely a good read. Yeah, and I mean, I think this is always interesting. I think it's interesting when we read stories that aren't in our genre, right? So you guys know me, right? I do all types of stories and all types of genres on the stream, but I'm not a fan of all types of genres, right? I tend to be fantasy, sci-fi nerd. I like thriller, I like mystery, but I'm not a fan of all types. Regardless, because I'm also an editor and I've been writing my entire life, I went to university for writing and I have a background in it, I'm able to separate genres and look at it from the pure storytelling perspective and ask myself what's working, what is the writer's intent. So I think there's always ways for us to be able to provide valuable feedback, but everyone's experience and background is always different. So I think that's always something important to take in mind. And I think when offering feedback, like, hey, this isn't my genre, I prefer reading, but this is just what stood out to me. I think is definitely really, really good. Woo! Getting so close. I know, 42 subs away from 1,000. We'll be there soon to infinity and beyond. All right, my friends. So let's get into yours, Zen. All right, and let's get it queued up. All right, and I am all ready. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, so I am all ready. So let me pull up Zen's here and see what we got. All right, and let's go. Yeah, that's fine. I'll like adjust this slightly. Okay, so let me pull this up. So for those of you who haven't, who might be new to the community or you're just hopping in, let's see. This story is Welcome to Spellpaige Academia. It's a fantasy sci-fi slice of life story by author Zencast5. And we've read a couple previous chapters earlier on. And let me see. So they're just wanting to make it flow. So it sounds like this is an earlier draft. Zen, I love your notes here. Yep. So this is the first draft. So remember, we're not going to focus on grammar. There's probably going to be grammar opportunities because most of us, like, we all have grammar opportunities in our early drafts. So we're not going to focus on grammar. We're not going to focus as much on style. Right now, we want to see, does it make sense? Does it flow together? So we like to ask ourselves, do the characters make sense? Does the dialogue make sense? And how is the overall tone? All right. And let's hop into it. Welcome to Spellpaige Academia, Middle School, Chapter 4. The teleportation pod thrummed softly as it tore through space and magic alike, pulling me across galaxies. Still catching my breath from my mad dash to the Mikey station, I leaned back in my seat and tried to steady my thoughts. I have made it. Barely, but I was on my way. When the pod finally docked and the exit glyphs glowed, I stepped onto the teleport train that would take me to Honesto. Crowds filled the train, buzzing with chatter, bags clinking with charms, and the low hum of magic-infused engines. I weaved through the aisles and found a window seat, then settled in. For my bag, I pulled out the essentials for long rides: my smartphone, earbuds, and a good book. I was just queuing up a playlist when a breaking news alert flashed across my screen. Breaking news: Conchu 6, conflict escalates. The headline tightened something in my chest. I tapped the screen. An anchorwoman appeared on screen, clad in a ballistic vest and helmet, her hair fluttering in wind, stirred by nearby artillery. I'm Una Gibbs, coming to you live from the front lines. The conflict has grown exponentially, with no signs of either side backing down on this once serene planet, she reports, voice steady despite the surrounding chaos. Behind her, a missile launcher roared to life, launching a round into the hazy distance. Explosions rumbled like distant drums. Yuna flinches, then quickly regained her composure. We've just received word that 2 Gokiburi spies have escaped the planet, she added, voice sharpening. Their current whereabouts remain unknown. Stay tuned for further updates. This is Una Gibbs, Galactic News. The screen flickered away with urgency. I couldn't take any more. I shut off my phone and shoved it deep into my skirt pocket, as if things weren't bad enough. Still, what are the odds of those spies would end up on Mahojo 6? I shake the thought off, open my book, and try to lose myself in the pages. A few minutes later, a sharp voice broke the quiet rhythm of the train. Listen, old man, I've told you already, I ain't moving. I looked up. The voices come from farther down the carriage. No one seemed willing to intervene. I sighed, bookmarked my page, and stood. As I approached, I saw the scene clearly. A middle school girl was refusing to give up her seat in the priority section for an elderly man. She had small yellow horns on her forehead, pointed ears, and fiery red hair in a perfect apple cut. Her cocoa-toned eyes locked onto mine with sharp defiance. She wore the same Spellpaige uniform as me, minus the tie. Her blouse collar was up, and the blazer looked like an accessory instead of regulation attire. I stepped forward. Look, I said, pointing at the old man. He clearly needs that seat. This is priority seating. She jerked her arm out of my grasp and glared at me like I'd personally insulted her ancestry. You looking for a fight, Roku? I flinched slightly at the word. Roku. My people. Humanoid cats from the planet Gozen. Magic-born. Too proud for our own good, some say. But I held my ground. No fight, just basic respect. You're disturbing the peace, I added firmly. I reached out and guided her aside, speaking gently to the elderly man. The seat's yours, sir. The red-haired girl didn't take that well. As I passed through to a quieter section, she grabbed me by the collar. You still looking for trouble, Roku? My instinct screamed at me to walk away, but I didn't. I smacked her hand off and met her glare. Maybe I am, but right on cue, the train's PA chimed. Now arriving, Honesto Station, Please gather your belongings and watch your step. I smirk. But this is our stop. I'm not starting drama first thing in the morning. I turned and walked off the train. Oh, and by the way, I called over my shoulder, the name's Tomoko. As I left the teleport train, I felt my tail wag. I'm on edge. I hope I don't end up in the same class as that girl. As soon as I got above ground, Honesto hit me like a wave. Everything sparkled: streets, signs, the air itself. Magic danced with technology in seamless harmony. Hover cars zipped past roomlit signs. Vending machines offered enchanted potions, steaming buns, or sparkly juice, depending on your mood. Even the street lamps pulsed softly with enchanted crystals. I couldn't help but slow down, wide-eyed. This place is wild. Buildings towered like sculpture. Street murals moved with animated loops. Shop fronts glimmered with enchanted jewelry, spell kits, and runic stationery. I spotted a family riding a cloud-powered stroller and another kid zooming by on a hoverboard, avoiding potholes. I even see an ancient city floating in the sky. Oh, incredible. I checked a floating street clock. 6 minutes until the entrance ceremony. Just a few blocks away. Time for a shortcut. I stepped to the side and whispered, "Speed plus levitation equals flight." Magic thrummed through my limbs, tingling like stars beneath my skin. I kicked off the ground and soared upward. Honesto unfolded below me in a vibrant web of color and movement. Then I saw it. Spellpaige Academy. A massive structure shaped like an open book with a crystal obelisk rising from its spine. There it is. But just as I blinked to turn, zap! Something invisible stopped me in midair. It felt like flying into a bug zapper. My momentum crumbled. I plummeted, but not for long. A gentle force caught me mid-fall and slowed my descent. I landed on my feet, dazed, as someone reached out to steady me. "Careful," a voice said, smooth and amused. "Try not to make a shocking first impression." I looked up, ready to protest, only to find a warm smile that melted my irritation. Thank you," I whispered. But as I turned to ask their name, they were gone. Just gone. But one thing I noticed is that I smell flowers. It smells familiar. However, I didn't have time to dwell. I ran the last blocks to Spellpaige, mind spinning. On a planet where magic and danger walk side by side, nothing is ever just coincidence. Maybe my journey was beginning sooner than I thought. End reading. Awesome. Really, really great work. I was definitely really engaged and pulled into that chapter. What I remember, even from the previous chapters that we've read, I felt like that this chapter specifically had a really nice balance of we had some slice of life moments, we had some plot, and then we had a little bit of tension and a few obstacles. That of what I've read so far, I think that chapter was might have been my favorite, if I recall correctly. There's just a lot that worked out really, really well in that chapter, and I was very happy how it turned out. So I definitely have to say, really, really nice work. I would say that I would say the plotting and the world building. I would say plot and world building was definitely the strongest. I'm asking myself, I think I mean, the character development, you did have some nice character development moments. So I think probably more just cleaning up the dialogue more than anything. Um, yeah, I mean, overall, the chapter is in actually decent shape. I would say this chapter specifically is probably a little more ready for an edit, in all honesty. But let's go into it. Let's see how we feel. And let's see if we can what we have for you. And awesome. So Zen, as I'm pulling back here, the teleportation pod thrummed. So we're getting a nice opening moment to the station as they were teleporting from the previous area. I've made it barely, but I was on my way. These are moments where you could use italics if you really want to have the main character's thoughts stand out. But that's a personal style. That's a personal choice. Um, I think you did a nice job of setting up this initial intro, so I'm fine with that. And we're getting to Nesta, stopped another teleport train. So you're basically arriving at the train. It's all hustle and bustle. I think what's interesting is I was always a Harry Potter fan. This gives me like the Harry Potter vibes of like, okay, they're on the way to Hogwarts. So I'm like, that's what I personally loved about this. And I think you kind of capture that like that heading to school type of vibe and type of dynamic. Which for anyone who likes like that slice of like that like school slice of life, I think is perfect for. This was a quick note, and this is me being an editor with colons. As I got to make sure that I'm calling this out correctly. All right, so I am not as much a fan with colons. So like the reason being, especially in fiction, like I think this makes it feel a little bit more like a textbook. And this could just be me personally because I'm so used to seeing these used specifically as more of like a definition or a description. Um, if there's a part in the book where it's like, okay, they open up a definition and it's like describing something, or it's like maybe if sometimes it's a list, and you do have this as a list, but I think there's just stronger punctuation to focus on this. That could just be a personal pet peeve of mine, but of the non-standard punctuation marks that we tend to use, right? Ellipses, parentheses, colons, um, um, semicolon is a little bit more common-ish, but of the non-standard ones, I think the colon is my least favorite one to use, at least generally speaking in terms of fiction. But that could just be a me thing. The reason being is because it makes this feel like a list, and I don't want it to feel like a list. I want it to feel like I'm experiencing the things that she loves and she's pulling out, right? Who doesn't love pulling out their smartphone and their earpods because they want to be able to listen to some great music, right? On the train ride. So, but that's just me. And then I love how you do this, the breaking news. I thought this was a really nice burst of tension. I actually really, really liked that. And I thought that was really, really nice. You tapped the screen, and Anchorwoman appeared on screen clad in a ballistic vest and helmet, her hair fluttering in wind stirred by nearby artillery. Interesting. I love that. I think you could, if you wanted to, you could add one more sentence and give us a little bit more context about what we're seeing on the screen behind her. Well, I think she's very straightforward, right? But I think like um military tanks and a bomb goes off in the background, or rubble is in the background. And I think you could do that in addition because for the setup. But I do really like how you interrupted that. Imuna Gibbs, the conflict has grown with no signs of either side backing down. Voice steady despite the surrounding chaos. I like this. This is good. Like I said, her dialogue's a little on the wordier side, but with where this is at in the drafting process, it's in a great spot. I think where if I were to edit this chapter down, I'd probably be editing pieces of the dialogue to make them just more succinct. Let's see, beside her, a missile launcher. Right. And then you have this setup here behind her, which this is good. I think if you set up with like one line what we see here, then you can reference it here and it makes it even more flow even more dynamically. And this is good, right? So two Gokiburi spies. So clearly this is a foreshadow. I love foreshadowing. I love foreshadowing. So clearly this is a foreshadow. We probably get to see something with these Gokiburi spies later in the novel or the series. I like that. And I think it's good that this is short and to the point. I think I think you did this broadcast as something that's supposed to be very straightforward, and I think for me it works because it doesn't pull me too out of the present moment of our main character, which is good. When you introduce the sharp voice breaking the quiet rhythm, I would say also give us a sharp upbeat feminine voice. I think just maybe clarify the gender or clarify the tone of the voice so that way the reader can identify what type. Because I totally thought it was a guy at first, but then you describe after. So I think just for this, I might add like an adjective. to add further description for this. Let's see. And then this is good, right? So clearly, so this chick has small yellow horns, pointed ears, and fiery red hair and a perfect apple cut. What a vivid description. Nice work. Um, this I'm like, all right, this is totally like the Draco Malfoy moment. It's totally the Harry Potter and the Draco Malfoy moment on the beginning of the train. I was all for it. This is great. I was like, clearly we know they're going to end up in the same class and they're going to fight each other and it's all good. Or maybe they'll become besties later on. Who knows? But she is definitely a fiery little apple over here, apple cut. So I liked that. I was very happy with the way you did this. And I thought this was very nice. You were using contrasting to develop both of the characters. If this other character works, especially with the Roku, you did some nice world building here. And I think the world building for our protagonist race, great job. Really, really good job. Yeah, so I think that worked out really well. And it's like if you really wanted to, you could do a little bit more with the elderly old man, like what are they wearing or who they are at. It's not necessary. I think it just would just be flavor than anything. But I think this scene does what it needs to do. Good, good, good. And then this is me being an editor. Only 3. Lipsy should only be three dots. Okay, now arriving at Estes station. Yep. So I get to the stop. Yeah, I mean, this is good. I think as I left, I think at this last moment, I like that you have her get in the final say. I would have her. I'm not starting drama first thing in the morning. I might include a lasting impression of what that girl is doing, of what the little antagonist in this scene is doing. I might like I turned and walked away, or she pounded her hands ready, getting ready to throw me, or she threw her hands up in the air. You could do it right here. But I think I would give one last impression, but that could just be my subjective decision. It's like I kind of like want like a last idea of what they're doing. Why doesn't she just run after her and punch her in the face? I don't know. But I think the last, like, oh, and by the way, my name's Tomoko. Cool. She's like, yeah, I don't care. Street signs. Now we get the description of the place. This is good. Vending machines offered enchanted potions, steaming buns, or sparkly juice, depending on your mood. So that is good. But depending on the mood, I mean, depending on the mood, I might go depending on one's mood. And then even the street lamps pulse with enchanted crystals. This is good. And this is all like cozy setup and description for the world. That's all fine stuff. Yeah, and you even do her interiority here. So if you're make sure that this is consistent throughout the book. If you're going to do her interiority and do italics, it should always be italics if that's going to be a consistent thing for her. And then we get a little bit of magic. Nice. And you know what? I think I was good with this. I mean, clearly something happens, but just as I banked a turn, zap. Something invisible stopped me midair. It felt like flying into a bug zapper. Yeah, okay, I could see that. A bug zapper. My momentum crumbled. I plummeted, but not for long. Careful, voice said, smooth and amused. Try not to make a shocking first impression. I looked up right only to find a warm smile that melted my irritation. Thank you. But as I turned to ask their name, they were gone. A voice said, I looked up only to find a warm smile that melted my irritation. I might, because I know you're just foreshadowing this character. They're probably going to be a predominant character in the next scene. I might give a little brief description, like one sentence on something about their face, in addition to that warm smile, but that's just me. What I actually really liked about this is the sentence variety. Careful, a voice said, smooth and amused. Try not to make a shocking first impression. You have dialogue cut up with a speech tag, and a descriptor in between another thing of dialogue. And then we have action. followed by her dialogue at the end. And then we have action. And then we're using a non-standard ellipses here, non-standard punctuation. Um, I like moments like this. Readers like it when you're mixing up sentence and paragraph structure and flow because it keeps it unexpected and it feels natural. So I think the more that we can continue to find like flow and we can continue to find variety for sentence structure, it just keeps the novel moving. So really, really great work there. This was a nice moment. And then something smelling like flowers. That's actually a really nice call out. I like that. The only thing with this italics is I wasn't sure if this was like her head or because this feels a little bit like the narrator. I might just adjust this so it feels like it's in her head. But maybe my journey was beginning sooner than I thought. Yep, nice little cliffhanger as we're about to go to the first day of school. So nice. Really nice work, Zen. That's all that I got for you, but thanks so much for submitting and looking forward to reading more. Definitely looking forward to reading and hearing more, my friend. Awesome. I think what I always love, I love seeing different stories, whether we see different parts, whether we see them evolve over time. I think it's one of the coolest things as we continue to see revisions, different chapters, and we get to see the stories come to life. I think that's one of the most awesome things, and that just made me really happy. It really does. So thanks again for submitting, Zen. I appreciate you. All right. And then hey, what's up, Jail? I saw you popped in during that stream. Always love having you here. And let's see, what do we got? Yeah, and I mean, I think there are definitely like some times where we could clean up stuff, but I think like because it's still an early draft, like I usually don't worry too much about grammar or cleaning up. I think those are things that will like toned edit down. But I think stylistically and tonally it all made sense. It was all really clear. I felt like the chapter overall flowed together really nicely. And I don't know if I remember feeling that same way about some of the previous chapters. I can't remember because it's been a little while, but I think from start to finish that chapter had a nice tone, that had a nice flow. Different things happened, but it all felt like it was within the world. So really, really great job. I absolutely love that. I totally loved that. Tyler, but Ratchet and Clank was always one of my favorite games. Um, Zencast. That actually, like, now that I think about it, that totally had that like Darla Grack. That was like that thing where she popped up on screen. I think that was perfect. So I think to even more kind of what I had said, I think just shortening down that dialogue, making it even more impactful, I think will make it as shortening it down will make it as impactful as possible. So really, really great work on that. Yeah, Quell, that's actually a good recommendation. I pulled my essentials for long rides: smartphone, earbuds, and one amazing book or two for longer trips. I like that. That would be a nice flow to it. I really like that. Of course, the news, how to interrupt my music. Yeah, I mean, I think those are some good recommendations. Because what does the character care about in that moment? They just want to sit on the train and read their book and listen to their music, but then they're interrupted with the news broadcast. So I think that would be a nice, really nice flow. Interesting, Mass. You're saying it's just me, but the overall pacing for this is a bit slow. The pacing for the chapter was okay. I mean, when I pull back and I ask myself from a pacing perspective, I'm like, what happened? So they arrive. She gets to the train station. She gets on the train. Breaking news alert! Fight pseudo fight with the redheaded chick. Um, magic flying movement to get to school, get zapped to the ground, saved by mysterious guy, and chapter. So I mean, I think there was a variety of it, and I asked myself, could Could there be like a faster pacing or a slower pacing? I think because the genre is slice of life, I think it's supposed to have that balance of those moments where you just kind of pull back and it's kind of like this cool, like they want you to experience like you're at school. So I think that's actually part of the subgenre, but I'm not 100% familiar. From an overall pacing storytelling, I think the pacing is fine. And I think that cleaning up like the dialogue, cleaning up like some like the wordiness, I think that will just make it tighter and make it do what it's wanting to do really well. So, but that's a good call out. I don't think it's supposed to be a fast paced chapter either. It feels like it's supposed to be like that thing that happens right before school starts. Yeah, so I mean, this is a really interesting commentary. So you said you write a lot in first person. I've seen too many pieces of advice that say if you replace I with she, he, they, just write in third person. I So thank you for bringing that up. First off, there is no right or wrong way with first versus third person. I think when we think about third person POV is the most popular. I want to say like 70%. I think it's like 70 or 75% of stories are written in third person POV, I believe. The last time I checked the statistic, but first person POV is still a very can still be a very effective way of storytelling, right? Because you're that much closer to the character in the character's headspace. And it's a different type of reading experience for a first person. Whether or not the story is in third or is in first, I think that entirely comes down to what is the author's intent. If the author wants to write their story in first person, write the story in first person. Now, some genres of writing or of storytelling tend to be a little better for third or first person, while other genres could go either way. Um, Fantasy tends to do a little better with third person because you're generally having to juggle different character POVs. You're generally having to juggle different things that are happening across different landscapes and magic systems and all this stuff. That's not to say that there haven't been successful first person POV fantasy stories, but third person, it tends to be a little bit more effective. Let's see. First person could work very well in horror. Thriller, horror, mystery, first person POV could work great because then you're that close to the scares and the thrills and the monster that's going to kill you, the serial killer, the evil bad guy. First person could work well with romance. First person could work very well with romance because you get that one step closer to feeling like you're in the relationship itself. But yeah, so I think it's also contingent on the genre and then the author's intent. If the author's like, you know what, most people don't usually do first person for this type of genre, so I'm going to do first person, I would be like, more power to you. Absolutely. The question is how are you telling the best story you can in the point of view that's going to give the best reading experience to the reader. So yeah. I think it's interesting, Quella, because I think a lot of the times it's easier advice for people to say like make it third person because third person is easier to write, easier to edit, and easier to do. Because I wouldn't necessarily say third person is easier. I think we're just more influenced by third person writing style and POV. So third person is more well known. So because it's because it's more popular, we're just more used to it. JL, you're like the first person really lets you zoom into the internal world of the MC. Yep, absolutely. Third zooms out a bit and can make more zoom for the settings and other characters. Yep, exactly. Um, can you do books that go back and forth that do third and first person? I'm sure you could. It makes it a little harder. You generally want to stick. I think the recommendation is definitely you want to stick to one POV or the other for your books because otherwise it can become disorienting to the reader. But I'm sure there's books out there that have done well where they found a nice blend, right? It just that's not very common. Generally, exactly right. No, very frowned upon. But you know what? I'll say never blend first and third. And I'm sure there's a book out there where the writer pulled it off and it did amazing, right? There's always exceptions to the rules, but generally, unless you have written 10 books under your belt and you understand your craft, you understand your style, I wouldn't try to blend two unless, because you have to be very intentional and there's a lot of things. There's a lot of obstacles that could detract and pull from the reading experience. So call you Imp. Okay, awesome, Imp. Let's see. You're in the middle of writing a book with interlude chapters in third and person for the main narrative. Interesting. Interlude chapters in third and first person. Okay, so you're trying to do a blend of third and first, right? So that really goes to what we just said, right? So I think I could see why people would give you advice of like just change it to third or change it to first because you're picking two POVs, which is very hard to blend. Yeah, I mean, it's just a hard thing to do. And it is the reason it's frowned upon is because when you change a POV, even if it's from chapter to chapter, it disorients the reader and it makes it harder for the reader to get in the character's head because they get used to being in a character's head a certain way. But then if the POV shifts, it almost feels like it's a different story. That's why it's kind of hard to it. Now you're like, hey, well, maybe one character is third POV and another character is first. I'm sure it can be done. Like I was like, I think it can. I think any type of writing can be done. It's just how you execute it. So sticking to one POV builds trust with the reader. You're right, because it builds that credibility. But what if you're writing a story where you're wanting to create a potentially I ask myself, I'm like, all right, if I were to try to blend third and first, how would I do it? I think I would have to do a unreliable narrator and a reliable. I think I would do an unreliable character and a reliable character and try to use their POVs to contrast against each other. I think I would do it as like a scene or a story study and see if it was possible. And then of course, the only way to know if it works, you got to get feedback, right? So whether or not you love it or not, we're biased to our own stories. The only way we're going to know if it works is your readers got to like it. If the feedback is your readers are like, it's kind of disorienting, it's hard for me to follow along, there's your feedback. And not just from one reader, a bunch of readers. If the feedback is like, oh, I like this and I like this and it feels different, there you go. That's the way. Let's see. So you said the third person is set in the current day, first person for the story that is being told. Every so often, the people around the campfire call him out for his telltale. Okay. So essentially it sounds like you're using the world building. Your current day. So you're using it as a timeline. Storyline. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. So basically you're saying third person of like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what happened in the past. First person is this is the story that I'm embarking on right now. I think that can, I think there's actually a different name. I think there's actually a different name for that type of storytelling, I believe, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. Where it's basically a character is telling a story that has already happened, but the way it's blended, I think that's a different variation of third person. It's not limited. It's not omniscient. It's yeah, it's a type. It's a framing device, but it's a type of third person. I just forgot what it's called. Yeah, it's a variation of third person. But I forgot. I'd have to Google it. That's interesting. I mean, I hope it works out. Imp, you should definitely feel free to you should submit one of your story excerpts on a future critique stream. Would love to check out an excerpt of it and kind of see what you got. I'm always interested when writers are trying new things and trying different things. I am someone who I'm like all for experiment. If your style is you want to do something different, do something different. But you're going to have to recognize that because you're doing something different, it's going to be harder. There's going to be more obstacles, and you just enjoy the journey, right? I think that's awesome. I mean, I'm writing a very difficult book. I know I'm writing a difficult book, and I'm writing a difficult book because I've written my entire life and I wanted to challenge myself with a very difficult world. I was very intentional about it. So Yeah, Jail, that is an excellent recommendation. Find a book that does it and look at the reader responses and reviews. Yes. So whenever you're trying something different, absolutely. If you want to find case studies. So if you can find case studies where it has been done well, it gives you a framework to work from. Completely agree. That's a great recommendation. That's super cool. That's awesome that you're getting good early feedback then. And that's actually really, really cool. So, but good luck with the story. I would definitely love to hear more about it. Um, if you haven't already, feel free to join the Discord. It's linked down in the YouTube description, but the Discord is where we all connect outside of the live streams. So definitely feel free to come join us on the Discord if you haven't already. I was like, I have to make sure that my Discord link is not broken. All right, cool. Yep, Discord link works. So definitely come join us for the Discord. But on that note, my friends, thank you so much for joining me today. I can feel my voice giving out, so I'm going to have to wrap up readings for today. But I really, really appreciate you. So, for those of you who've submitted, or if you're planning on submitting and you haven't already, submit now. Like I tell writers all the time, the sooner you submit, the better chance you have of getting to an earlier critique show. We've had a higher volume of submissions lately, which is why I'm trying to make sure that the critique stream is staying on every other weekend, so we can try to get through the stories in a timely manner. But yeah, and once again, like let's say you submitted and like you're like, hey, it's been a month. You can always reach out to me and ask me, like, you're like, hey, how many stories there are, or if you're needing feedback sooner, you can go throw it up on the Discord. We have a bunch of writers in the community who also will offer feedback and are so happy to trade stories. Like maybe like, hey, I need help on my story. You can always trade for alpha reading feedback as another way. You can join the YouTube channel membership. Our YouTube channel membership. To learn more, you just hit the join button down below the YouTube video. Depending on the tier level, that gives you access to channel members only live streams, which is just early access to live filmings of videos. We have a little bit of a growing catalog on there. You'll get access to the critique group, which is a monthly critique group, private monthly critique group. And then channel office hours. So, yeah. There's definitely free ways and then paid ways. I was trying to make sure there's a balance. And then make sure that you stick around for tomorrow and next week. And we actually got a lot. So tomorrow I'm going to be joined by the founder of Author Nation. Let's see, make sure I got this queued up. Yep. So I'm going to be joined by Michael Evans, the founder of Author Nation. Make sure I said it right. An author sidekick. I'm like as I'm making up, author sidekick, and we're going to be exploring the world of AI. How do you distinguish your writing from AI? How can you leverage AI not to write the book for you, but to market your book so that way you can be more effective and more get your book out to a wider audience. I'm going to be interviewing Michael tomorrow on the Create Right Now podcast as we dive into what are they doing with Author's Sidekick and how can you grow your readership? How can you differentiate yourself from all the AI stuff out there? So we're going to be diving on that into tomorrow's episode of the Create Right Now podcast, 1 Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. I'll be here. And then next weekend, we got some fun stuff. So make sure you join us on Monday because there's going to be a huge announcement regarding our next fiction competition, the Freaky Friday, the second annual Freaky Friday competition. So I'll be making an announcement on Monday. And the next Saturday, we're going to be having a brand new live stream for everyone. So this will be a brand new type of live stream. I'm going to be testing it out. I'll be sharing details of it on Monday. So make sure to come join us because we got some fun things going on in the community. And if you're wanting to check out some other stories, you can go click on the reading sprints for storytellers. It's linked down below if you want to go read or listen to some of the previous stories that I've read over the past, 40, 50 episodes of the critique show. And most importantly, like the stream on your way out, help us show the algorithm that writing streams are cool. All right, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all for joining in the conversation. We had some great feedback, some great notes, and I will be back with the next story and critique stream in weekend after next. So make sure to submit. But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. Stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. It's time to write
now.
Sorry.
Right now, not right now, but right now. Read now, right now. Is that right?
Words are wind, but stories